The first time Oren Gallagher stepped aboard the Zhoren warship Vaskerel, he coughed twice from the acrid recycled air and muttered, "Smells like someone microwaved a gym sock." He was ignored by the towering, cobalt-skinned alien escort beside him, who had not yet decided if Oren was a liability or a living curiosity. The Zhoren were not known for their hospitality, nor their sense of humor. Oren had been selected under what could only be described as a bureaucratic accident. He wasn't special forces. He wasn't a diplomat. He was a structural engineer with a background in environmental systems and a knack for surviving terrible situations. His assignment to the Vaskerel came after an obscure interspecies cooperation clause was invoked by the Galactic Treaty Council during a resource dispute between the Zhoren and the Delcaran Confederacy. He was supposed to be an advisor, a consultant, nothing more. Lieutenant Threx, the Zhoren soldier assigned to monitor him, kept his distance during the first 3 days of their journey to the contested system of Veltrax. Oren, with nothing but his tools and a handheld diagnostic unit, wandered the ship's corridors cataloging infrastructure problems and muttering to himself. "These coolant lines are held together with duct tape and hope," he said on the second day. Threx stared at him without blinking. On the fourth day, things changed. The Vaskerel was ambushed. Without warning, the Delcaran fleet erupted from a gravity fold near the asteroid belt. Their ion torpedoes slammed into the Zhoren cruiser's underbelly, rupturing its secondary power grid and sending half the ship into darkness. Emergency klaxons shrieked. The artificial gravity hiccuped, sending Oren smashing into a bulkhead. "Status report," roared Commander Vaskerel as the bridge flickered in and out of light. Threx pulled Oren to his feet. "Human, return to the civilian quarters." Oren wiped blood from his eyebrow. "Not a chance. I saw the coolant pressure graphs yesterday. If those systems are hit again, your reactor's going to run hot enough to melt through the hull. You are fragile," Threx growled. "You will die." "Maybe," Oren said, limping toward the corridor junction, "but you'll die slower." And louder. He didn't wait for permission. The engineering deck was chaos. Zhoren technicians barked commands as sparks rained from a ruptured panel. A power conduit had exploded, mangling 2 crew members. Oren pushed through the smoke, grabbed a diagnostic wand from a rack, and scanned the main reactor's thermal regulators. "Regulators are fried," he said to no one in particular. "If we don't reroute the heat load, we're going to blow." A Zhoren technician, barely older than a cadet, looked at him. "You are not authorized." "I'm not asking for authorization," Oren snapped. "I'm asking for a wrench." The cadet hesitated, then handed it over. Oren crawled into the sub-redundancy tunnel, his ribs aching from the earlier impact. The confined space was barely wide enough for him to work. He bypassed the damaged regulators with a patch of thermal conduit, redirected the flow into the auxiliary tanks, and sealed the loop with a strip of fusion tape. When he emerged, coughing and covered in soot, the reactor's temperature had stabilized. Commander Vaskerel arrived not long after. "You disobeyed orders." Oren leaned against a bulkhead, catching his breath. "Yeah. But you're not dead." Vaskerel stared at him for a long moment. "Perhaps you are not as breakable as we believed." Oren tried to shrug and winced. "I'd appreciate a medkit before you compliment me again. Also, I think I cracked a rib." The next few days were tense. The Vaskerel limped toward a nearby moon to conduct repairs, anchoring in the shadow of a crater to avoid further detection. Oren was confined to the medbay while the ship's AI ran a full scan on his injuries. The diagnosis came back: 3 cracked ribs, a mild concussion, and a compression injury in his left shoulder. The Zhoren medics were efficient but had little experience treating humans. "You require rest and compression garments," said the attending medic, a pale-skinned Zhoren named Hethel. "You must not strain." "Define strain," Oren asked. "Lifting, bending, running, exerting effort, or engaging in combative activity." "So, everything I was doing before." Hethel blinked slowly. "Correct." Oren stayed in the medbay for 2 days. On the third, alarms blared again. This time, it wasn't an ambush. It was sabotage. Half the ship's oxygen generators failed simultaneously. Vaskerel assembled a squad to investigate. Oren, against medical orders, followed. He found the breach first. A Delcaran saboteur, disguised as a maintenance drone operator, had triggered a feedback pulse into the ship's life support core. When Oren entered the chamber, the saboteur turned, a plasma blade in hand. Oren froze. "Okay, so this is happening." The blade hummed. The saboteur lunged. Oren ducked just in time. The blade sliced into a control panel, showering sparks. He grabbed the nearest object, a carbon wrench, and swung it wildly. It connected with the saboteur's arm. The alien hissed, but didn't drop the blade. Another swing. Another dodge. Oren's shoulder screamed in protest. He was already panting, ribs flaring with pain. The saboteur moved faster. Stronger. Oren knew he wouldn't last long. Then the door burst open, and Threx charged in. The saboteur turned, distracted for a second too long. Oren tackled him. They crashed to the floor. The blade skittered away. Threx grabbed the saboteur's arms and pinned him. Oren rolled off, gasping. "You were injured," Threx said. "Yeah," Oren managed. "But so's your oxygen system." He overrode the safeties. "You need to re-engage the fail-safes or this chamber's going to depressurize." Threx didn't argue. He barked into his comm, and within minutes, a team of engineers arrived. The saboteur was hauled away. Oren was taken back to the medbay, this time under guard. "You were reckless," Vaskerel told him later. Oren sipped water through a straw. "You're welcome. You risked your life for a vessel that is not yours. For a people that are not yours." "I was on the ship," Oren said. "Seems pretty mine at the time." Vaskerel didn't reply. But when he left, he paused at the door. "You were still fragile. But perhaps less so than we assumed." The next week brought quiet. Repairs accelerated. Threx began inviting Oren to briefings. The crew, once cold and indifferent, now nodded in greeting. One even offered him a ration bar. Then came the distress call. A Zhoren outpost on a nearby planet had lost power after a magnetic storm. The Delcaran had intercepted the signal. If they reached the outpost first, dozens of soldiers would be wiped out. The Vaskerel moved at top speed. Oren joined the ground team, against every medical recommendation. He wore a reinforced vest, carried a toolkit, and was paired with Threx. The drop shuttle descended into the storm-blasted outpost. Wind howled. Structures were half collapsed. Injured soldiers lay trapped beneath debris. Oren got to work. He crawled under wreckage to stabilize a soldier's spine. He rerouted a power relay to restore emergency lighting. He used a makeshift splint from a drone's leg to immobilize a fracture. When the Delcaran arrived, it wasn't with a fleet, it was with a tactical strike team. Oren barely had time to react before plasma shots scorched the ground near him. Threx shoved him behind a barricade. "Stay down. I need to get to the control tower," Oren said. "If I can restore the comms, we can call for backup. It is suicide. Only if I fail." He ran. The control tower was across open ground. Oren sprinted, dodged fire, and climbed the wrecked stairwell. His shoulder throbbed. His ribs burned. He forced the door open, crawled to the console, and hotwired the transmitter. The signal went out. 5 minutes later, the Vaskerel's gunships arrived. The Delcaran retreated. Oren collapsed in the tower, unconscious. He woke up in the Vaskerel's medbay a day later. For tubes in his arm. Monitors beeping. Hethel stood beside him. "You suffered a refracture of your ribs. Your shoulder is inflamed. Your body is exhausted." Oren blinked. "Did we win?" Hethel nodded. An hour later, Vaskerel visited. He stood silently for a moment. "You saved our wounded. You risked yourself repeatedly. You restored our communications. You were still fragile. But you were something else, as well." Oren coughed. "Stubborn. Resilient." He turned, then stopped. "The crew has voted. You are to be awarded the Iron Crest of Vaskerel." Oren blinked. "Is that like a trophy?" "It is the highest honor a non-Zhoren can receive." Oren tried to sit up and failed. "Can I get a pillow under my back?" Threx entered, a rare look of approval on his face. "You were supposed to be an advisor," he said. "Not a savior." Oren smiled weakly. "I never said I was good at following directions." Oren was still bruised and stiff when the Vaskerel entered orbit above Seeger 4, a mining colony that had gone silent 3 days earlier. The planet was barren, dust-choked, and riddled with subsurface tunnels. The Zhoren had established it as a forward extraction site for iridium or a metal crucial to their energy lattice tech. Its sudden blackout had raised more than logistical concerns. There were rumors of Delcaran infiltration. The recovery team was assembled before sunrise ship time. Oren showed up in a freshly issued exo cloak, limping slightly, but without complaint. Threx met him at the shuttle bay. "You were not on the roster." "I added myself," Oren said, fastening a restraint harness. "You'll need someone who understands how mining systems fail when people stop maintaining them. You are not fully healed." Tell that to the bone regenerator. It disagrees. Threx didn't argue further, which Oren took as progress. The descent was rough. Seeger 4's atmosphere was dense with iron particulates, enough to throw off the shuttle's stabilizers. They landed half a kilometer from the main facility, just short of a collapsed gantry. The ground was soft, almost spongy, despite the dry air. The team fanned out 8 Zhoren infantry and Oren, who immediately noticed the heat haze warping the horizon. Feels like someone left the oven on, he muttered, brushing dust off his visor. There should be perimeter drones, Threx said. Scanners show none. Oren scanned the collapsed gantry. That structure didn't fall randomly. Looks like it was pulled. One of the Zhoren soldiers, a younger female named Kelva, pointed toward the north ridge. Movement brief. Thermal echo. They advanced cautiously, weapons raised, Oren trailing behind with his handheld mapper. The facility loomed ahead, half buried in red dust, its antenna masts bent like wilted flowers. The main entrance had been crumpled inward, as if something massive had struck it from the outside. Inside, the corridors were dim and coated in a chalky residue. The backup lights flickered, casting erratic shadows over unpowered terminals and discarded equipment. Oren crouched near a severed cable and peeled it open with a multi-tool. Power wasn't just cut. It was drained. These lines were siphoned down to the last volt. Threx swept his weapon across the hall. Why? Oren stood, brushing grit from his knees. Best guess? Something down here needed energy more than the miners did. They moved deeper. The facility's lower levels were accessible only by a freight lift, now jammed halfway between floors. Kelva pried open a side maintenance hatch, and they descended the shaft using emergency ladders, the silence between them growing heavier. At sublevel 3, they found the first body. It was a miner, slumped against a wall, eyes wide open, skin desiccated. No wounds. No sign of struggle. Just empty. As if something had taken everything useful and left the rest behind. Kelva crouched beside the corpse. No blood. No trauma. Oren scanned the body. Electrolyte collapse. Like his cells were short-circuited. You were saying energy was extracted from the organic systems? I'm saying, Oren replied, standing slowly, that whatever did this didn't care if the power came from a wall socket or a person. They pressed on, passing more bodies. No one had run. No barricades. No escape attempts. Just people. Sitting or lying down, perfectly still, as though they decided to stop existing mid-task. They reached the central reactor chamber, where the iridium core should have been. Instead, there was a gaping hole in the containment shell, and a network of metallic tendrils stretched like roots into the floor. At the center, something pulsed faintly dim blue, almost organic in rhythm. Kelva raised her weapon. That is not Zhoren technology. No, Oren agreed. But it might have started as it. Threx stepped forward. Containment protocol. We isolate and destroy it. Oren put a hand on his arm. We don't even know what it's doing yet. That thing might be the only reason the structure hasn't collapsed. It killed the crew. Or it evolved from what killed them. Look at the tendrils they're drawing from the mineral veins below. It's using the iridium like a circulatory system. Kelva turned toward Oren. You believe it is sentient? I hope not. Otherwise, we're standing inside someone's nervous system. A low vibration trembled through the floor. Oren staggered slightly. Please tell me that was a shuttle landing. No vessels in proximity, Threx said. The blue pulse began to accelerate. The tendrils retracted slightly, curling inwards. Oren stepped back. Okay, I think it knows we're here. Kelva moved toward the containment breach. We should place charges and withdraw. No, Oren said quickly. If you detonate now, you could trigger a seismic collapse. This whole sector is hollowed out with tunnels. You have another plan, human? Yeah, I talked to it. You intend to speak to a machine organism? I intend to try. Before anyone could stop him, Oren approached the glowing core. He reached into his tool belt and withdrew a copper coil, a signal repeater, and a thermal regulator. He assembled them into a basic harmonic emitter, tuning it to the pulse frequency. As he activated the device, the light from the core dimmed, then brightened in sync. The vibration ceased. Well, Oren said, wiping sweat from his brow, I think we just achieved a handshake. Threx stared at him. You are interfacing with an unknown entity using spare parts. Yeah, it's kind of my thing. The tendrils began to shift, retracting from the walls, pulling back into the central chamber. A low hum filled the air, not mechanical, but tonal. Almost musical. Kelva adjusted her visor. It's generating acoustic patterns. It's communicating, Oren said. Sort of. It's like sonar, but coded. You understand it? No. But I've heard worse at Earth weddings. He adjusted the emitter, letting it echo back a reverse tone. The core responded with a shift in color from blue to violet. Okay, now we're dancing. The hum intensified. Then, without warning, the lights across the facility flared. Doors unlocked. Consoles rebooted. Power surged through the lines, bypassing the ruptured sections. Oren stepped back. It's giving the system back. Threx didn't lower his weapon. And what does it want in return? The violet faded to a soft green. The tendrils retracted fully, disappearing into the crevice where the iridium core used to be. The pulse slowed. Oren knelt beside the emitter and shut it down. I think it just wanted to be heard. Hours later, after the recovery crew confirmed the facility had stabilized, they set up an observation perimeter. The core organism, if it could be called, that remained dormant. No further casualties. No signs of aggression. Back aboard the Vaskerel, Oren sat in the infirmary again, this time not as a patient but for decontamination scans. You approach anomalies the way some people approach vending machines, Threx said, standing nearby. Insert tool, expect result. Sometimes you get chips. Sometimes you get electrocuted. You survived again. Barely. I was banking on it being curious, not hungry. Threx hesitated. You were not afraid? I was. But curiosity's louder. Kelva entered, holding a sealed data tablet. Analysis confirms the structure grew from modified mining nanites. Self-replicating. Logged as a Class 3 emergent entity. Great, Oren said, taking the tablet. Now I can say I gave a speech to a baby AI born in a cave. Kelva looked at him for a long moment. You are unconventional. Is that Zhoren for lucky idiot? No. It is our word for someone who sees order in chaos. Later that night, alone in the observation bay, Oren looked out at Seeger 4 as it rotated slowly beneath them. Somewhere down there, a new form of life was quietly growing inside a shell of metal and stone. He tapped his chin. Probably should have asked it for a name. The stench of burned ozone hit Oren first. It clung to the air inside the auxiliary hangar, thick and sour. A Zhoren technician staggered past him, coughing black smoke from his lungs, eyes wide and unfocused. Oren caught him by the shoulder. What hit us? The technician's tongue twitched with panic. Fuel cell ruptured. Deck ignited. Fire suppression failed. Oren looked down the corridor past the hangar threshold. Pale blue flames licked at the base of the bulkhead, where a collapsed drone loader sparked wildly. The temperature was climbing fast, and the emergency shutters hadn't dropped. That's not a small failure, Oren muttered. Threx, already donning a rebreather, appeared beside him. The hangar's containment field is locked open. If the flames reach the mag thrusters, the entire port side will vaporize. Oren tightened his mechanic's gloves. Looks like I'll be earning another unwanted badge. He sprinted into the smoke before Threx could stop him. The heat punched through his suit in waves. By the time he reached the control panel, his undershirt was soaked, and his pupils had shrunk to pinpoints. He dropped to one knee beside the comms relay, tore open the casing, and yanked the interface node free. The panel was dead. No signal. No override. The fire suppression system wasn't offline, it had been disabled. Oren keyed his headset. Someone sabotaged this. Manual relays are fried, and the system thinks the fire's under control. Confirmed, came Threx's voice through the static. 2 more systems in the adjacent deck were overridden moments ago. This is coordinated. Oren didn't respond. He was already prying up a floor plate to access the secondary conduit. The heat down there was worse. His gloves began to bubble at the palms. Hethel is going to lecture me for hours, he grunted, crawling halfway into the shaft. He patched a jumper cable between the auxiliary power line and the shutter control node. The field flickered once, then snapped into place with a hiss of decompressing air as the magnetic seal engaged. The flames vanished behind the barrier. Oren slumped back against the wall, panting. Containment sealed, he said. But we've got someone playing sabotage bingo. Threx appeared moments later, flanked by 2 armored Zhoren guards. One of them handed Oren a sealed hydration pack. He downed it in seconds. You cannot keep doing this, Threx said. I'm not trying to. Things keep catching fire. You are human. Your skin would have boiled if you had remained in that shaft another 30 seconds. Good thing I don't tan easy. Threx narrowed his eyes but let it go. 2 hours later, the Vaskerel was on high alert. Internal surveillance had been compromised, and the engineering deck was under lockdown. Commander Veshker had ordered a full systems sweep and authorized cabin inspections. The saboteur hadn't left a trace, but they had left a pattern. Oren sat cross-legged in the maintenance hub, surrounded by power logs, thermal records, and security timestamps. He hadn't slept since the hangar fire. His hair was matted with sweat, and his eyes were dry and red. Still, he kept going. Kelva entered quietly and placed a ration cube beside him. "You've been awake for 10 hours. I'm aware. You should rest. I'll rest when whoever's trying to turn this ship into a fireworks display is floating in a containment cell." Kelva knelt beside him. "You found something?" Oren pointed to a cluster of timestamps. Every incident happened within 9 minutes of a shift change. That's when crew density is highest. It suggests someone who knows our routine. Kelva studied the logs. No Zhoren would betray their ship. Maybe not willingly. But if someone's compromised, or not who they say they are. Kelva's eyes narrowed. Oren stood, joints cracking. "I need to scan the environmental monitors on Deck 12. That's where the fuel leak started before the hangar fire. If there's residue from a foreign compound, we'll know someone brought something on board." They reached Deck 12 just past second cycle. The corridor lights flickered intermittently. A lone maintenance drone whirred past them, its treads leaving faint smudges on the floor. Oren knelt beside the wall sensor and opened the diagnostic port. "Half the logs were wiped," he said. "But not all of them. Look at this resin-based polymer trace." "That's not used in Zhoren tech." Kelva's posture stiffened. "Delcarin?" she asked. "No. Something else. Too stable for their polymers. And it's not human standard either." The lights flickered again, then went out. For a full 3 seconds, there was only silence. Then a sharp sound, a hollow clang from the far end of the corridor. Kelva raised her weapon. "Back." Oren pressed flat to the wall. That wasn't a drone. The clang came again, closer. Then a hiss. A shape emerged from the dark, tall, insectoid, cloaked in shimmering camouflage netting. Its limbs were long and jointed at odd angles, and it held a jagged tool in one hand that crackled with residual current. Oren's breath caught in his throat. "That's not on the crew manifest." The creature lunged. Kelva fired once, striking the wall as the figure twisted sideways within human speed. Oren ducked as the tool sliced the air above him, barely missing his shoulder. He rolled toward the wall panel and yanked free an exposed conduit, swinging it in an arc. It connected with the creature's midsection, sending a pulse of current through its body. The figure spasmed, then dropped to the floor, twitching. Kelva approached cautiously, weapon trained. "Unknown species," she said. "No matching physiology and records." Oren crouched beside the body. "It's wearing rebreather gear. This thing can't survive in our atmosphere." He pulled back the netting to reveal a face like a cracked eggshell, translucent and lined with branching veins. The eyes were jet black, no pupils. Kelva removed a small scanning node from her belt and passed it over the body. Minimal heat signature. "It's cold-blooded." Oren exhaled slowly. "Which means it's been here a while. Probably hiding in the vent systems." Threx arrived moments later with 2 guards. He took one look at the body and froze. "You found it." Oren pointed at the tool. "It was using that to overload systems. Probably had a whole map of our infrastructure." Veshker arrived shortly after, his expression unreadable. He examined the corpse, then turned to Oren. "You engaged it directly?" "I didn't exactly have a choice. You could have died." "Again, not my first preference." Veshker glanced at Threx, then back at Oren. "We'll perform a full sweep of all internal cavities. If more of these are aboard." "They're not," Oren said. "This thing was trying to weaken the ship, not destroy it. If it had friends, they'd have struck by now." Kelva nodded. "Agreed. It was working alone. Sabotage, not invasion." Veshker remained silent for a long moment. "You have once more risked yourself for this vessel. And once more, you have succeeded." Oren sat down heavily on a crate. "I'd like that in writing, so I can show the next commander who thinks I'm just a structural engineer." Kelva placed a med patch on his shoulder, where the creature's tool had grazed him. His skin was already beginning to blister. "You'll need the dermal regenerator," she said. Oren winced. "Yeah, Hethel's gonna love this." 3 cycles later, the Vaskerel resumed standard operations. The creature's body was placed in containment for study. No others were found. Security protocols were upgraded, and environmental scans were increased across all decks. Oren spent the next day in the infirmary, where Hethel clucked over his injuries with clinical irritation. You suffered electrical trauma, blunt force bruising, and thermal damage. Again, occupational hazard, Oren said, sipping nutrient fluid through a straw. You do not have an occupation. You cause occupations to develop around you. Threx visited briefly, carrying a small metal case. You are being reassigned to advisory rotation on the bridge. Oren raised an eyebrow. I thought I wasn't bridge material. You are not. But the commander has decided that unpredictable humans belong where they can be watched. Oren grinned. Say that again, but slower. Threx didn't indulge him. He handed over the case. Inside was a medal, different from the iron crest. This one was smaller, etched with an unfamiliar symbol. Oren looked up. What's this? Recognition for non-combat resolution in hostile conditions. Oren blinked. You guys really need shorter names for these things. Threx didn't flinch. Congratulations, Advisor Gallagher. Try not to set anything on fire for a few days. Oren leaned back on the infirmary bed, the medal resting on his chest. No promises.